Hello and greetings of the day. Welcome to this webinar on new rules of HCP engagement presented by Veeva Systems and hosted by ET Healthworld. We all know that the COVID-19 pandemic has changed the way we work. We move day in, day out of things. The agility of business has really adapted to the new ways of life now. Of course, engaging with the HCP for the pharma sector has been quite a learning experience. This panel shall take it up and discuss it point by point. I'm Archisman Mohapatra. I'm your moderator for the day, and I have a fantastic panel with me. Let's get introduced to them. Mr. Atish Majumdar is the president, Mankind Pharma. Hello, sir, and welcome here.
Hi.
Mr. Atul Suri is the vice president and strategic business unit head for Alembic Pharmaceuticals Limited. Hello,
Hi, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Anantha Nema, Country Manager India, Veeva Systems. This program is brought to you by Veeva Systems and hosted by ET Healthworld. As we learn from the pandemic, going out, technology has taken a big role in our lives. We all have sort of moved into hybrid systems of operating. The communications have changed. Some of them are still physical face-to-face interactions, and some of them are amplified technological interfaces. The pharma industry, which has been the pharma industry is big time into face-to-face interaction with the healthcare providers, and that's how it has performed over the years. The last 2.5 years have been quite a learning experience. Technological adaptations, as well as a learning curve, both for the providers, the healthcare providers, as well as the pharma people. How have they adapted? There are multiple channels of interactions now, and a lot of noise as well. Let's learn from the panel here. Yeah, I'll come to all of you. Let's get started with Mr. Atish. So Atish, how do you see the evolution has happened? Like what kind of transformation have you seen in digital engagement trends when it comes to healthcare providers and the pharma people?
Yeah, greetings of the day to all of you who are hearing us today. And thank you, ET, for this platform. I think the whole world is still processing what has happened in the last 2 years, right? I think it was always imperative for pharma, what digital has always offered. Scale, cost effectiveness, improvement in adherence, improvement in awareness. I think all these were always imperative. But pharma was too caught up pre-COVID in the models which pharma has been adopting for donkey's years. Somehow the small virus came in, changed everything. People were compelled to change in many, many ways. And all of us did change during this whole process. This kind of accelerated the change, which was always imperative. And from a promise of going digital, we went digital, right? And I really see when, as we come back to a world which is kind of very similar to the world that we had left behind when COVID came along. I think what with everybody is now trying to do is trying to balance, how much physical and how much digital. I think that balance, what is the right kind of salience that each one of these propositions need to have, is something we are discovering and something we'll learn as we go along. But having said that, I think we made great strides as an industry during this COVID period and post the COVID period. And I think the implications for all pharma companies, pharma leaders, is not to leave behind the learnings that we had from COVID. So if one were to really answer your question, what are the trends that we see emerging out post-COVID, or the new normal, as most people call it? I think the number one thing which I see is a great willingness of pharma to really go digital. I think from an understanding of doing what is right, I think we are into the time where we know what is the right thing to do, and it is important that we do it. That's first. The second thing is we have seen our customers change. When I talk about customers, how doctors prescribe medicine, how doctors consume information has undergone a change, and also how medicine is consumed. I think all the way from research of a doctor to a medicine to the final consumption, the whole process has undergone digital. So that is a new trend emerging. The third thing which I see is that, when we really got into the COVID times, we saw the emergence of a multi-channel proposition. I think the learning that has come along today is to go for an omnichannel proposition. Very simply put, the difference is that when you talk multi-channel, you talk social media, you talk WhatsApp, physical, all the channels that you have. Omnichannel is really about syncing in all these channels together to deliver one single message. So I think that is a trend which we are definitely going to see, a very important trend which will shape content, because at the end of the day, pharma is but a set of conversations. So I think omnichannel marketing, omnichannel conversations are going to be very, very important. The other thing which pharma is expected to do is have a service proposition which is trustworthy, which is credible, and the image of a quality manufacturing company, is very, very important today to really market your product, because the doctor today seeks beyond the pill value from the pharma company today. So a digital presence is so very important. That presence itself kind of defines transparency, communicates trust, your intent that you have for the final consumers. This is what I see are the emerging trends, and something which pharma will have to embrace and go forward with. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Atish. Mr. Atul would like to add to that.
Yeah, so I quite agree with everything that Atish had very clearly said. The biggest trend, of course, is digital proliferation, whether it's the pharma companies, how it's happening within our companies, whether it's the HCPs, or whether it's even the patients. And I quite agree that, the lockdown really triggered this sort of jumping on the digital bandwagon. The advantages were very clear for everybody to see. It was quite coordinated. It was convenient. It was customized. It was accessible. So what does this do to the three major pillars, really speaking? The HCPs, it extended their reach, and like how. And therefore, they're taking to it. And that's why the digital proliferation from the HCP end also. The patients, it was a much, much better patient experience. Now what's happened is the expectations of the patients for this digital experience has also increased. So even HCPs, the facilitators like pharma companies have to ramp up what they have in terms of digital to meet up with the final patient's expectations. However, a key piece here is how did it impact the pharma company and the HCP in their engagement? Everybody's spoken of it and everybody knows of how we actually went in. But I was reading an article in the Journal of mHealth, and of course, Anantha may even know of that, where a survey was done with, I think, Across Health and them, where it had emerged that 60% of the HCP engagement came only by field reps today. And if you were to compare it with the United States of America, it's 8%, and in Europe, it's 6%. So the point I'm giving you is this: look at the kind of scope that digital now has to nibble into, just the face-to-face interaction. And that is happening faster than slower, really speaking. The other interesting bit of statistics that one saw there and understood is the engagement time. The conventional engagement time in a face-to-face interaction went up from what it was at 6 minutes to 14 minutes in a hybrid or a remote sort of a model. So it's all about the kind of time that you get to convey and communicate. And I think there is a great realization that a blended approach is something. There's a greater acceptance, there's a greater understanding of a blended approach coming in. So how does digital weave in with a face-to-face interaction is something that pharma companies have to think about now. Of course, in terms of emerging trends, one sees definitely in terms of at least digital marketing, a lot of new things are coming up. Conventionally, the way pharma companies would just take visual aids, while you had an iPad or an Android device communicating the same things. But today they're jumping onto the digital bandwagon, and like how? I mean, use of nano, micro influencers, more of user-generated content is coming. Just regular people using the products and talking about it. Of course, it lends itself far better to an OTC sort of a product portfolio. But sooner than later, you are going to shape perceptions about products, about molecules. You're soon going to convey genuinely happy consumer behavior across these channels to people. So these are some trends that are coming up. And from the doctor thing, the huge amount of increase in the active users on various doctor network platforms. Again, it all boils down to that trend of greater acceptability and understanding of digital and weaving in of face-to-face and digital. So these were some of my initial thoughts in terms of emerging digital trends, in our industry. Dr. Mohapatra.
Yeah, thanks for setting the tone over there. I'll go to Mr. Ananth. Ananth, how do you see these trends?
Thanks, Dr. Mohapatra. I think I think most of the points have already been narrated by Atish and Atul because of their pharma experience and the way they have been managing their customers day in and day out. One point I would like to make it here is that yes, the pharma industry in India was very, very traditional way of engaging with customers, more on the face-to-face channel. But now, because of the COVID, we have got into the bandwagon, if the way Atul has to say it, is on the digital. Now, when we got into this, I think we started talking about multi-channel engagement. Now we have also moved to omnichannel, as Atish mentioned. Now, what is omnichannel is that you give a seamless experience to the HCP while deliver the one single message on your product and the therapy area. Now, when we do that, which is actually is the most important today. We got into that. Pharma companies started engaging with HCPs using various channels. Most of the times it is isolated. Some are coordinated. But at the end of the day, if you have to deliver an omnichannel experience, you need to have that, all the channels talking to each other, and you deliver the single message. Now, the companies are now optimizing on how they need to engage with HCPs going forward, given that there is an omnichannel engagement going forward. So that way, the companies are looking at what the customer expectations are, how their willingness towards the digital engagement vis-a-vis the face-to-face, and accordingly, you will have to plan your action. And that's where, optimizing the channel and engagement is happening. And we see that's going to be the way forward in the pharma engagement with HCPs. Dr. Mohapatra.
Thank you, Mr. Ananth, for those inputs. Clearly, within the first couple of minutes of this webinar, we already highlighted many important aspects. Atish highlighted the importance of omnichannels, and he also emphasized on the digital proliferation, while Atul went on to narrate the scope of this growing business over here, the market and the potential where we could actually operate here. And then the engagement time we get more with the HCPs these days. Of course, these things are very dynamic. So we have to continuously learn and improve and optimize, as you rightly said, Ananth. Going back to Atul, I'd like to get his views on what kind of challenges should we anticipate as, like, from a pharma sector perspective, as we try to venture into this kind of say face-to-face transition to hybrid model of interaction with HCPs.
Yeah, so I think Ananth did cover a part of this when he spoke. I think the biggest challenge is, people are just taking a very singular approach to it. The approach has to be totally integrated. There has to be an umbrella concept. While most of us have spoken of omni-channel, I just wanted to sort of share perspective. Omni-channel as opposed to multi-channel is not just one channel, 2, 3, 4, 5 channels, hit everything. The key difference in my view of omni-channel is it is the customer at the center of all of that. All the media that you have, the platforms that you have, whatever you're sending out, you have to have the customer in the center of it all. The relevance has to be towards the customer. And that is what I'm saying is a big challenge today as we are transitioning into understanding digital in a omni-channel perspective. So what do I mean by that? Let me just give you an example of what actually happened when, pharma, we are understandably the laggards in digital. A lot of people I speak to in the pharma industry don't agree. They say, no, we are great. And the only thing I tell them is, when was the last time you went to a bank? Didn't BFSI take it on, decades back? We are way, way behind in all of this. And so coming back to the main point is what is today happening, and most domestic Indian pharma companies that market and promote their products in the country have divisions. You have a PMT in place. So the PMT thinks it's digital is nothing but, using a little bit of technology. They're all just barging, and I call this a carpet bombardment happening to the doctors. And therefore, it is nothing but, you integrated, very clear-cut communication, medical communication is not going to the doctors. The doctors are getting inundated. So I think the biggest challenge is back at home in the pharma company, and we'll probably speak about this later in the program today. How do we actually create structures and themes within on how to actually carry out digital marketing or digital engagements with the doctors? Out there at the field, also there are certain challenges, and the field force thinks, there's nothing like a face-to-face. It's, reps always say face value. The minute the doctor looks at me, he sees the brand actually in my face. All that is important. There also has to be a little bit of tuning in to the field that digital here is actually there to enable you to perform far better in the chambers of the doctors. So that acceptance also has to come out. There has to be a mindset change back at the field. Now, at the HCP level also, you would face a lot of challenges. Quite clearly, 60% of the HCPs today, as per data, and I thought it would be higher actually, but 60% of our HCPs are digital natives. However, having said that, the absorption of technology or the absorption of going digital, and I'm not just talking of adapting to it or adopting technology, but absorbing the technology where they realize that this is the technology that's there to assist them, firstly in updating themselves and receiving stuff that's coming in from various channels through pharma companies or otherwise, or from their own associations or their own federations that they have. Plus, it is a great technique and tool to actually reach out to your patients, and the advantages they've realized. But the acceptance and the distance that they have to travel is reducing, but yet I think we're far away. And I don't blame the HCPs really. And I have this 4R, concept, 4R concept, and I'll talk about it. Firstly is, as far as all the digital bombardment that's going on currently, imagine you're one doctor, there are 100 pharma companies around you, there are enough associations around you, there are enough groups that are wanting to send out information to you. So you are at the receiving end, the first R really. And therefore, there is an inbuilt reluctance. The minute there's an email bombardment coming or there are WhatsApp messages on a particular World Heart Day coming in, there is a reluctance. They say, hey, there's too much happening around me. And the third thing is actually content, which needs to be relevant. And therefore, that's the third R really. Is the stuff getting to that doctor relevant or not? And that's really the third R. And if that is there, then that leads you to the fourth R, which is the resurgence of digital adoption of what they learned the advantages during the lockdown. And therefore, I think very clearly, these 4 R's sort of encapsulate the challenges that we have. A, realize that the doctors are at the receiving end. B, try and do something with relevance so that reluctance goes out and automatically resurgence will happen. So that's the way I'm looking at the challenges that we have. And once we deliberate on each one of these challenges going ahead, maybe even in this panel today, we will certainly have our answers. Dr. Mohapatra.
Thanks, Mr. Atul. Mr. Atish would like to add to that, because those revelations have been like a bit overwhelming, to understand that this is not going to be an easy walk. We have to change behaviors here and also penetrate through the 4 R's that Atul just now mentioned. How do you react to that?
So I really think, with the COVID coming in, the big facilitator or catalyst has been a mindset change, whether it is for doctors, patients, pharma marketers. So there has definitely been a mindset change. But it's not only about intent. There are challenges which we face today. The number one challenge which I feel today, to really optimize your digital proposition is the infrastructure. We want to go digital, but we have really not got that infrastructure which we would want our team to have or doctors to have. Wi-Fi in most of the places is a real challenge. Maybe not in the metros, but once you go up country, you face a serious challenge. So that's something that comes to my mind. The second is capability. Value selling the digital proposition. None of the field force has ever been trained on that. You are doing a digital webinar or you are doing an ad board digitally, but the rep really doesn't feel that this is something which really has a great value to the customer. So his attendance becomes much more important to him than the consumption or consuming the information that is built into that webinar. The third thing, digital is a promise of customization. But when you look at the current knowledge platforms which we use, either for awareness or for education, it's completely, it's very, very mass, So I think the big challenge is there is an innate, inherent promise in digital, that we will customize information for you, something that you would like to consume, you can have it. So social media is so big today because I get to consume what I want. But the kind of promise which digital gives in the real world as compared to the pharma world, I believe there is a big challenge for pharma to navigate. The fourth challenge which comes to my mind is, content is the most important thing as far as communication goes. Now, most of our marketing teams, the way it is structured, most pharma companies have a marketing team and have a medical team, right? And pharma marketing is more about communicating the facts. There is a regulatory environment around us, which compels us to talk facts and clinical trials, data, blah, blah. But what is important going ahead, I think storytelling in terms of how you present your facts, how arresting you make it. What is the attention span of the consumer? Today, you see reels in Instagram and Facebook, they've taken over Facebook and Instagram. What would a reel really look like? So a big challenge would be, how would you structure your marketing team from the classical marketing team that you had to a content creation team, which kind of augments the marketing proposition with the medical affairs proposition. So broadly, these are the four big challenges which are coming to my mind. And I believe pharma are taking those steps that is required to navigate these challenges. And that is why we see and believe that, pharma will be at the forefront of the digital revolution that has just taken place. Whether you look at AI, whether you look at IoT, whether you look at blockchain, whether you look at machine learning, I think pharma is embracing them more than ever. So these are the challenges, yes, but I'm sure we'll be able to navigate that. Thank you, Dr. Mohapatra.
Thank you, Mr. Atish. Mr. Anantha, I'll come to you. I don't envy your position now. Now I've heard of all the challenges, and I'm sure pharma companies would be reaching out to you to design a very effective strategy for them, a multimodal and omnichannel strategy. How do you do that? How have you supported them with whatever tacit knowledge that we have gained over the last 2.5 years?
Yeah, great question. Actually, it's good to hear from Atish and Atul, who are senior leaders in the pharma industry and got a great experience in transforming their organizations from a traditional way to a digital way of engagement. If you look at, for me, it could be about 2-3 challenges. One is that, pharma is always a rep-centric, organization, which means they've always been focusing on what rep is doing, how he's engaging with customer. Very little on the customer-centric approach. So what has happened is, traditionally, we focus on rep and whether he's meeting, not meeting, whether he's doing, chemist survey and understanding prescription and so on and so forth. Now, when COVID happened, access got restricted and people wanted to engage with the HCPs on digital front. So everybody started using various channels. Standalone channels, it could be emails, it could be virtual meeting platforms, it could be conducting webinars and so on and so forth. If you see, all of these are isolated channels delivering more or less the same messaging. And as Atish mentioned, the ability of the marketing to give a content to the field to engage with the customer in a storytelling manner is very important. So if you do multiple channel approach, you are not going to deliver that experience to the customer engagement. And that's where the integrated multi-channel engagement capabilities, we started talking about it, where you get a 360-degree view of the customer engagement, how we are doing on face-to-face, how we are doing on email as a channel, maybe on a virtual meetings, webinars, CMEs, and so on and so forth. So when you know how you are engaging with customer on that and how customer is engaging with you, then you can build a lot of strategies around multi-channel, around the customer engagement, and the content can be driven accordingly. And that's where pharma companies during the COVID, they reached out to us and how do we engage? And in fact, we have 2-3 channels, which we give in collaboration with the face-to-face channel, which gives you a 360-degree view of customer engagement. A lot of companies went ahead and executed that omnichannel engagement, and they've been very successful. I have to pick up one point which Atul mentioned in the first point, is that the 60% of the customers are wanting to engage with customers on digital front. Having said that, if you look at the engagement time, when a rep does a face-to-face call, I've also worked in the field as medical rep when I started my career. It hardly, it's about 1 minute, 1.5 minutes on an average, which takes. But today, when we engage with the virtual or digital channels, the average timings with our experience at Veeva, we have gone up to about 10 minutes, 11 minutes average. So, which is significant time, face time with the doctor. Now, what that requires is also a good content the marketing is able to give them, so that the rep is able to communicate that and engage with the HCP is very important. If you are able to address these challenges in terms of the capabilities, both from the field perspective and also the marketing perspective, if you bring in these two together, I think you can deliver a great customer experience, Dr. Mohapatra.
Thank you, Mr. Anand, for your views, inputs over there. I'll go to Mr. Atish. You mentioned about content, and it's sort of cliched now when we say content is king. Of course, for the HCP and the pharma sector, it's a bit of movement from paper content to digital content, right? So how do you look at it? Like, how is this new content approach shaping up, and what are your takes here?
See, my first take here is the content must be credible. That's what people look forward to. Doctors look at HCPs, patients expect from pharma. They must be credible and they must be reliable. That's number one. The second is, if one were to choose between simplicity and relevance, I would choose simplicity. In the physical world, it's always about relevance. But in the digital world, people can go with as per their choice, and hence would like to see a presentation or a content which is very simplified. That's why you're saying it's important to tell a story in the digital world. You try that in the physical world, like you just told, Mr. Nema just said, you get a minute, and if you really try to build up a story, you're talking about 100 reps. I mean, it's mind-boggling, right? So when I look at content, the other things which is there in the present world is also applicable there. The new thing that we see about content is people want to consume content which is in capsules, right? Which is 2 minutes, 3 minutes. They like it that way, right? And that's why it is so important to be simple, so important to really know what you're talking about. The one other thing that we see is in digital, is the interactiveness definitely going up. Whatever content you create, whether it's a WhatsApp, whether it's an email, or whether it is an ad board, or whether it is a CME, the important thing to understand is the recipient here is very passive. And it is on the onus on the digital marketer and his proposition to see that you start interacting, because interacting leads to interest and to intensity. So, like you said at the outset, content is very important. It is the most important thing in creating a physical presence or a digital presence. And all the filters that is required in the real world also is required in the digital world. So I think this is something as an industry, we always knew it. This is where we have a head start over all the other industries. I think pharma communication has always tried to be very, very responsible. And, our communication has always been data-driven. So whenever we talk to a doctor, we have to come up with some evidence to communicate why our product is to be used. So that way, pharma, if you look at it from a different lens, we were the first industry to actually embrace data. All our conversations with customers, with the HCPs come from a data point. And if you don't have data, you just can't really have a very incisive communication. And lastly, as far as the content goes, I think we talked about beyond the pill value. So doctors or HCPs today really don't want to know only about your product, your brand, and where it works. They need to know much beyond. Today, there's a new understanding in the world of medicine Dr. Mohapatra would perhaps understand this better. But organs do talk to each other. They don't operate in silos, and I think that understanding is what HCP seek when you're creating content. The last thing is, rapid content creation. And that brings me back to my challenges of the marketing department. Today, digital content is consumed very fast. Are we really geared to create content very rapidly? Because pharma always had campaigns, which was like 3 months, 4 months, and you created a visual aid and how to go and communicate. But digital doesn't allow you that, right? Or the advantage of digital is that you can quickly change as per the situations or as per the requirements of the customer. And I think that is one area where pharma will really have to step up. Thanks, Dr. Mohapatra.
Thank you, Mr. Atish. Again, further dimensions of content that you have actually sort of laid out threadbare. I'd go to Mr. Atul. He sort of communicated a very interesting 4R model approach and then started with content bombardment and reluctance. How do you see this content approach has changed?
So, yeah. So firstly, between physical, digital, as far as content goes, nothing really changes because content has been king. With HCP's evidence-based content is even more than king. And I'll take that one step further. Evidence-based content without bias is something which is very important in our field because, marketers will always have a commercial angle. But I think today, to be true to your profession, you need to sift it and create evidence-based content without bias. I'm just adding that little thing there. Atish, of course, covered all the points, and I agree with him there. So what I will do is I picked up 2 points from Atish, one which I will offer a slightly different perspective on. And the other thing, I will try and just give you an example in support, really, of what he said. Of course, Atish placed before him that if he were to choose between simplicity and relevance, he would prefer simplicity. I would say I would prefer simplicity and relevance. And why am I saying that? Today, content, if it is going to be consumed and not just lying on the table or in the smartphone, has to be extremely relevant. And how does digital come in here today? Simply, you are today in a position to customize that input going into the doctor, that content going to the doctor. You have various tools. It could be social listening. It could be prescription habits. It could be, easier way of getting doctor profiling done. And then you create content that is extremely relevant to a set of doctors. And therefore, thanks to digital, you can proliferate that right across, extremely relevant and simple. So therefore, rather than simple and relevant, I'm saying keep it simple, keep it digital, keep it extremely relevant and customized to the person. It will get consumed. Otherwise, it will just slide there. That was one thing I was just adding perspective to what Atish said. The second point really, and I really agree totally on credibility, it's all about trusted sources coming in. Let me give you an example. We shouldn't be talking brands here, but it's a very old brand. There was Alembic is famous for a brand called Vicoril. So we came up with an email strategy where we would have something known as, Vico real updates, some real updates. We were punning on the word, and it was simple, plain, vanilla updates going in email. Now, we all know the normal open rate of any email campaign is barely 5%. I'm not here just to say, hey, great job done by Alembic. But the fact of the matter is that they said this is coming from a trusted company. This is coming from a company that has had this brand for so long, and they're here to tell us what else there can be. The open rate was 18%, which by any standard is way, way high. So circling back to the point that Atish made as far as medical and marketing communication down to doctors, the credibility is prime. So just to summarize what I said on content, evidence-based, without bias, extremely relevant, and of course, coming from a very trusted source, it will get consumed like how. Thank you, Dr. Mohapatra.
Fantastic. And as you summed up, you also mentioned about the possible profiling of the doctors and leveraging technology, the social listening data science part of it. Of course, now the rules of the game seem to be a bit defined. We understand the challenges, we understand the different approaches we have. Mr. Anant, you are a tech provider to the life science sector, and you have been providing support. What kind of support, and how do you provide? How do you ensure that you provide meaningful support?
Yeah. While we spoke about omnichannel engagement, customer-centric approach, we have been using different channels now in the hybrid world, both on the face-to-face engagement plus the digital channels playing together and engaging with the customers. And when pharma companies engaging with HCPs on all these channels, what is required is definitely both simplicity as well as the relevant content. And our content is more of evidence-based, absolutely. There is no second thought about it. Now, when you have too many channels, the need for different type of content is very, very high. And you need to come out with this content at utmost speed. If you are not able to come with utmost speed, you would be left behind, because the competition is so fierce in the Indian pharma market. If you don't come out with the good content quickly, somebody else will deliver the same message for you. So in having said that, do you have capabilities to come out with the content so quickly, which can go into all of these channels? Now, you need to deliver different messaging in the visual aids, which the rep uses to engage with doctors. The content which goes in the emails has to be different, and the content which goes into the virtual meetings have to be different. Now, all of this has to be, obviously, referring to the earlier discussion, it has to be at the storytelling. Now, if, for example, take an example of email as a channel. When you send an email to the doctor, if they don't see relevance, they will not even open the email and read it. Okay, and at the same time, it has to be simple. If you don't communicate that. So, having said that, do you have capabilities to come out with so many varieties of content quickly? Is there a platform which will help you? Traditionally, what we have seen in India, domestic companies especially, they don't have a very sophisticated tool which will help them to quickly get through, is because all the content which comes out of the pharma companies have to undergo medical, legal, regulatory approval, sometimes even compliance. Now, having said that, many people are involved in getting that content reviewed and approved. And all of this on a traditional way, on an email or a print happens, it takes a lot of time to come out. Now, that's where, as a service providers, we have a solution which will help them to deliver that content at utmost speed and have a visibility on where it is at the approval levels, so that you can quickly turn around. We had experiences shared by one of the company who onboarded our solution during the pandemic. They used to take, for a simple content, they used to take about 8 to 10 weeks to get the content approved and out to the market. Now they are taking as good as 2 to 3 weeks. So that's the speed at which they need to work. And I totally agree with Atish. He mentioned the last point is the speed, which is very, very critical for you to be upfront in playing in the market. So that's how we have been helping the industry to get quick to the market. Dr. Mohapatra.
Thanks, Mr. Anant. A sort of focus on efficiency. I'll circle back to Atul. When things are so fast moving, and of course it's a learning, two-way communication happening, and that's fantastic to see that it is happening. But how do you measure performance then? Like, what are your key performance indicator trackers, or what are you using any kind of OKRs now? Like,
yeah, so a very relevant question here, Dr. Mohapatra. Engagement is happening across so many channels, multi-channel, omni-channel, call it what you want. But fortunately, and I won't say unfortunately here, fortunately, it's happening on one single person, the customer. So actually looking at a channel-wise segregation for impact analysis will not be possible. This has to follow a set of, a very systems approach, so to speak. So what I have to offer here is, firstly, where companies go wrong is they just measure the amount of digital activity that is happening. They don't measure the engagement effectiveness. That needs to be done. And in your own question, you mentioned you need to have impact KPIs across each and every different channel. You cannot say, hey, because this did well, it's led to incremental sales. It is an aggregation of effort. And therefore, when you're actually measuring something, look at each particular channel, have an impact analysis or a KPI or an impact KPI set for that. And each one of these channels have such measurable criteria available. If you were to take a website, of course, you'd have traffic, a number of new visitors, number of repeat visitors, time spent, bounce rates. I mean, there are enough metrics to go by. Facebook, Instagram reach, likes, has the thing been shared? Has it been commented upon? How many views? Email, like I spoke about, open rate, conversion rates, SMS, WhatsApp, are there any conversion rates? Has that message actually led to a call getting generated? So my answer to this is, A, it has to be measured, because like they always say in famous management parlance, that anything not monitored doesn't get done. And taking that one step ahead, anything monitored but not measured doesn't get done effectively. So if you want your campaigns to be extremely effective, you have to measure everything in extremely quantifiable terms. And unfortunately, in this multi-channel approach, you'll have to segregate each one of those channels, have your own impact matrices in place, and measure it as per that, and collate it with a systems approach. And you will realize where you're going right, which is the medium to take up, to push further, which is the one to go slow on, and how will you then work with this. I think these were the thoughts I had insofar as measuring this new digital marketing campaigns bit.
Yeah, so the new rules are getting tangible indicators to measure, some metrics.
Correct.
Atish, what are your takes here?
So I'm completely in sync with what Atul just said. In business, you do need to measure things. If you measure it, then only can you drive sustainable growth and direction from the measurement or the metrics that you get in. And I think the KPIs for digital engagements are very clear: touch, activate, engage, act. So we know all this, right? But coming to the other side, just giving a perspective here. I said pharma is a set of conversations, right? So in the physical world, how were we really measuring the outcome of our calls? By the key messagings that we were having inside the clinic, and which kind of struck a chord with the customer. I think we are in the digital world, we are just taking very early steps now. And I think, honestly, I would really focus on creating a message which is in sync across channels, and seeing how that messaging actually syncs in or echoes with the customer. I think that would be the big metrics for us, because honestly telling you, I can tell you that for pharma, the digital propositions have really widened in the last 2-3 years. And like any other initiative that we have, we like to measure, that's for sure. But the big goal for any pharma company or any young leader, in my understanding, as far as digital goes, would be to only see, that the messaging is in sync and your customer echoes the message, because that's how the pharma industry really operates, right? You set a conversation in place which is echoed or has resonates across all mediums. That would be my biggest metric, actually. Thank you, Dr. Mohapatra.
Thank you, Mr. Atish. Anantha, I sort of empathize with what Atul and Atish just now narrated. Now that creates a lot of pressure on someone who is a tech provider. You must be helping out companies monitor these, right?
Yeah, I mean, we have been providing the omnichannel engagement capabilities for pharma companies to engage with their customers who are HCPs. And having said that, we give them a 360-degree view of customer engagement. So that is a measurable activity. They can do it. Now, when we say omnichannel engagement, for example, as when we do the face-to-face meeting, what is the message which has been delivered, whether that message has been appreciated by the customer. That's one measurement metric. Now, when we deliver an email, right? So when we deliver an email, first is to develop the habit of sending an email by the rep to the doctor. That's first measurement metrics. And once he sends the email, whether the email has been opened by the HCPs is a second matrix. And third metric could be to see how many of them have clicked through the email which has been sent. So based on that, you would know whether the email channel is working and how much it is being appreciated. So these are some of the KPIs. Now coming to the virtual meetings which we do. Now we have been talking about virtual meeting. Again, Reps did not have capabilities or never in their life have executed virtual meetings with the doctors prior to COVID. Now everybody got to the habit of doing it. Now, the first thing is helping them to execute virtual meetings with the HCPs who prefer it. Now, that's one metric. And once they start executing the meetings, what is the, how much of time they are spending with the doctor on the virtual meeting, whether it is 7 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes, and what is the conversations which is happening. This is a metric which you can do it. So if you have KPIs on all these face-to-face email and virtual meetings, and then all these things can be measured, and based on that, you take corrective measures to improve your messaging to the doctors. I think that is where the key to success when we talk about omnichannel engagement. And as a technology provider, we provide all this support to our customers, and they've been able to do it. Now, delivering omnichannel experience is an art at the end of the day, and we have started getting into that journey. Obviously, we are at a different level within India from different companies. I think we are getting better at that art of delivering omnichannel engagement. I'm sure we would master the art of delivering it very soon with these KPIs in place, Dr. Mohapatra.
Thanks, Mr. Anand. That's very convincing. Now, that brings us sort of to the last leg of this webinar. We have defined the new rules of HCPs, and what I could understand from this conversation is that providing a very engaging, enriching experience to the HCPs through integrated channels of communication, omni-channel communications, using a very strategic content, which is not just fast to create, but syncs well and echoes with the HCPs and can be delivered across different platforms, which can again then be measured for success. So that sort of like sums up the entire discussion we had. But then technology in itself is an enabler, and the pharma sector is a late mover in this regard, but a very heavy consumer of this entire experience. And we also discussed much that it is data-driven, evidence-backed. We can't be inaccurate in our approach. Just before I conclude, I request one line from each of you. How do you see the best or the most important enablers for this new rules of HCP engagement using hybrid models of communication? One by one, let's start with Atish.
So I think belief is all, because, to me, digital is a mindset actually. So belief would be right up there, followed by a omni-channel marketing strategy. This two would come to top of my mind.
Atul?
Yeah, so if I were to just think of one big thing that we all need to do so that it becomes an enabler in the truest sense, I think is to put a very well thought of structure within pharma companies to address this. And what I mean is you definitely need a project steward or something, somebody in the senior leadership level, like maybe Atish in his company, who actually drives all of that. And that's not enough. Beneath him, you need a digital strategist, a communication planner, a content strategist team. It has to be a formalized structure. There must be specialists on the job. And it doesn't stop there. You must also have a specialist who's, let's say, into media buying. And then you have your rollout teams. And once you have your rollout teams, it's far more important to have what we spoke of in the last question, is the campaign effectiveness and measurement team. So this sort of a structure has to be formally created in most companies. What is happening today, and I can tell you 99% of the companies are only talking of doing digital, and it's nothing but WhatsApp and emails going across. So the one big enabler will be to address it with a systems approach, to have a formal structure and crank in the specialists. And if you can't have specialists on board, possibly you would go to people like Anantha, Veeva Systems and stuff like that. But it has to be a very formal, structured approach.
Thank you, Atul. Anant.
Okay, I mean, Atish and Atul very clearly given their kind of one-liners, what they need to be. In my opinion, with our experience of working in the industry here, hybrid engagement is going to stay, and omni-channel is the way forward. And if the omni-channel has to be delivered, it cannot be looked at as a tactical strategy. It cannot be tactical in nature. It has to be strategic in nature. If it has to be strategic in nature, senior leaders of the organizations like Atish, Atul have to drive this whole change management in their organizations and to deliver the seamless experience to the customer. So I say it, just to repeat, it is not tactical, it is strategic in nature. I think I lined it with that.
That's a fantastic take-home message that you left us with. It's not tactical, it has to be strategic. But fantastic observations, systems approach, 4R, and then of course, many new issues that Atish also highlighted, and Anantha. It's been a very enthralling, engaging discussion thus far, and I thank the audience for staying with us. And this webinar on new rules of HCP engagement has been presented by Veeva Systems and hosted by ET Healthworld. So thanks Veeva Systems and ET Healthworld for getting us to this discussion. We can take some questions. Thank you. Yes, so we have received a couple of questions, and Anant, thank you for staying back for addressing some of these. I'll take them almost verbatim. So let's get started with this question from Mr. Sanjay Nirvan. He has asked, like, how would you rate the senior management in pharma on the digital learning curve vis-a-vis the FMCG sector? Would you like to comment on that?
Yeah, it's a very important question, and thanks Sanjay for asking this. Yes, first thing is that how are we in comparison with the FMCG? I guess on the digital adoption, we are definitely slower compared to FMCG, but I think last 2 years have really picked up. We take it slow, but we take it very hard, and we definitely go full steam on it. Now, coming to a question on the management, orientation on the digital. Yes, pharma is a very high-touch industry in India, and everybody focused on the traditional way of engagement with the HCPs. Having said that, COVID has changed the gears of the business. So even the senior management in the pharma industry have started inclining towards it because they see value in it. As I said in the last question, which Dr. Mohapatra asked, digital used to be tactical, but now it is getting strategic. I think that's where the senior management started looking at it. Some companies have taken it seriously. Some are still thinking about it, but I think it is time for us to get it there. I think we have started the journey. We'll have to see how exciting days going to be around.
Thanks, Anant. Now I'm going to roll a couple of questions together into one. So these are about engagement and how to engage more effectively with the HCPs. So Ms. Preeti is asking to elaborate on the omnichannel engagement strategies, or maybe what is this concept? And then Dr. Shantanu is asking that they have done quite a bit of webinars, but HCPs often mention about webinar fatigue. So the panelists here have mentioned that HCPs are open to digital detailing, but in his experience, they're not very keen about getting into a video call. So what are the other strategies? So that's where Mr. Shadab's question also comes in. So Shadab Alam has asked, like, what are preferred by doctors, text or video contents?
3 questions you have put it together, Dr. Mohapatra. One is that what is the the difference between the elaborate on the omni-channel engagement.
Yes.
Now, see, there are two topics here. One is the multi-channel multiple channel engagement, which is what we have been doing from years in India, using different channels along with the rep in isolation. Okay, so when you talk about in isolation, say rep is meeting and promoting the products using visual aid, that's one side of communication. Email is getting shot by the marketing team directly to HCPs, sending some other message which may not be rep may not be aware of. And virtual meetings was never practiced in India before COVID. And webinars were also executed in isolation. So that is why we call it as multiple channel engagement. Rep is one channel, email is one channel, virtual meetings is one channel, and then the webinars is one channel. So if all 4 of them doesn't come together, it is called as multiple channel engagement. Omni-channel is all these coming together, in the sense what rep is communicating is been getting augmented through an email by the rep, and the marketing. And then virtual meeting has got in continuation to the message delivered via physical meeting plus email. And then webinars to kind of top it up with some of the key leaders or key opinion leaders' opinion on it. Now, if you look at it from all the 4 channels coming together and playing like Atish mentioned, it is kind of a storytelling, not in isolation. And all of these are happening in synchronization, rep and the digital channels. And you get a 360-degree view of how you are engaging with customer is what is called as omnichannel engagement. That's the definition between the multiple channel and an omnichannel. Okay. Now, second question, you spoke about fatigue, right? Digital fatigue. Now, again, reflecting back on some of the points mentioned during the discussion, if the content is not very relevant to the HCP, the HCPs are not very interested to attend the virtual meetings with the reps or even the webinars, because everybody are doing these meetings from their perspective. Now, what happens if there is no relevant message has been delivered, which gets the HCP excited, then that's where the fatigue comes in, right? They will feel that there is no value addition they're getting in attending all of this, and that's where they are not very keen in doing it. Some companies are doing in India very, very formatted way, rather, very, very designed way. And then that excites the HCP as well to get into these calls, attending webinars, and that's where the relevance comes into the picture. So having a good content, which is a storytelling, will kind of take that out. I think it's been a good experience as far as some of the companies in India. I think we need to get better on that, and that's where we are at the point at the moment. Now, what works is the third question: whether the text messages or videos. Okay. I hope I'm not missing any of your questions, Mohapatra. Now, how do you decide whether the text message helps or the video helps, right? So it is very hard to decide which one helps. It all depends on the product life cycle. Okay, we call it as PLC in the pharma industry. If you where is your product and what kind of excites and what is the messaging you want to deliver in these channels matters. There is nothing called a doctor doesn't like text, only likes video, doesn't. Okay. For example, if you have some old product and you continue to develop and deliver text messages, is good enough. But sometimes when you have a new product, you may have to deliver it some key messages through a KOLs. A video matters a lot. Maybe mode of action is a video matters a lot rather than explaining it. So there is no right way of doing it or wrong way of doing it. It is more about understanding the product life cycle and then devising the text or the video strategy accordingly. I think brand management is quite capable of taking those, effectively and making decisions. Dr.
Thank you.
Mohapatra.
You covered all the questions without missing out on any single one. The next one that I have is from Mr. Rohit Pandit. I'm a bit confused with what he's asking, but it seems that he has mentioned that HCP engagement digitally is about 60%. Of course, that was referred to during the talk. By what time, as an industry expert, we should plan for 100% digital engagement? We did talk about hybrid modalities, but then he's asking like a full-on transition. Possibly that's what he's asking, a full-on transition to 100% digital engagement. Do you think that is happening?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question, right? So as I mentioned, I again reflect back on the point which I mentioned earlier. The pharma engagement with HCPs traditionally in India is a rep and the HCP interactions. I think that's something which will not be able to take it out, is because we value the relationship between individuals and that continue to stay. Okay. Now, hybrid engagement is kind of a Sone Pe Suhaga types, right? So if you have to add digital channels on top of rep interactions with HCPs, that's where hybrid comes into the picture. And that's where is the rep orchestrated digital engagement. We talk about it, which is again one more definition of omnichannel engagement. That's the go as far as the current trend in the pharma industry in India. When do we get 100% digital? I don't think we should. I mean, I will be able to make any comment on when do we get it to 100% digital engagement. I don't think it will happen in India, at least in the next decade, at least if decade or maybe 2 decades. But again, there is a company in India which kind of gone 100% digital on one specialty. They feel that, and they have a very matured branch. They feel that those brands can be promoted 100% digitally, and they have been very successful on that. Will that be applicable to all other specialties, all other therapy areas? May not be, and that's not the way we kind of envisage. And HCP still value the rep interaction. So we can't negate that, and rep continued to be the primary connect between the pharma company as well as the doctors. But adding more channels and making an hybrid engagement and getting into an omni-channel is the way forward. So I think that's where I would like to probably give my views on it.
Thank you. Again, I think we are overshooting time, but we'll take one last question, a quick one.
Sure.
From Mr. Vikas Munnat, and he has asked, what should be the KPI for digital and how would that be different from physical?
I think Vikas Munnat would have probably heard about all the KPI questions and the responses by Atul, Atish, and I also mentioned about it. For a physical channel, we have very, very well-defined KPIs, which is basically the rep and rep related activities. Whether it is core doctors met, how many times he has met, what is the delivery, what he is doing. So all of that, we are very, very well versed on the physical KPIs. For the digital, I'm repeating what I said in the last question on the KPI. On email, you need to have, say, sending email is one KPI, open rates by the HCP, second KPI, click-through rates, CTR, we call it as click-through rates, is the third KPI. Now, if we are able to do that, those are some of the key KPIs. We can get into much more details, but I think to begin with, these are three good peak KPIs on email. Virtual meetings, how many meetings a rep is able to execute, and what is the time spent on each of those calls. And I mentioned in India, we have had 10 minutes engagement on virtual. That's one of the best KPI. Obviously, the virtual engagement with HCPs gives a longer face time than compared to the physical call, is because the doctor is also not at pressure of meeting the rest of the reps because it is a well-planned activity. I think those are the KPIs. Webinar is, I really struggle to kind of define a KPI for a webinar, but I'm sure you would figure that out. But I think on the digital channels, I think some of the KPIs are good enough to begin. And if you are able to monitor and manage it, a job well done.
Thank you, Mr. Anand, for patiently answering those questions. It's been a fantastic 1 hour of discourse, of deliberation, where we learned about how change management could be brought into a strategy. So how we could adopt as well as adapt to the new rules of HCP engagement. Thank you so much, Mr. Anand, and of course, Mr. Atul and Mr. Atish for this webinar. Thank you. And
thanks, Dr. Mohapatra.
Yeah, and thanks to our audience for staying engaged all through, and also for the questions. It was wonderful having you to interact on the chat. Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Anand. Thank you.
Thank you.